couple of weeks ago, I spoke to the CA's Ed Bellamy about the licensing simplification project that's currently underway. The consultation runs at the moment until May the 6th, so go take a look and make your views known. This is stuff that should come into force, parliamentary time permitting, on October the 1st, so well worth a look. So Ed, what's this job you've got at the CA then?
So for about the last 9 months or so, I've been a policy specialist in the General Aviation Unit at the CA, and I've been the policy lead, what's called for the GA Licensing and Training Simplification Project, or what we sometimes call the GA Licensing Review for short.
If you could take a big sort of helicopter view of it, how would you give us a quick summary? How would you paint the picture of this project?
CA had run a consultation in December 2020 on opportunities post leaving the ARSA system, and one of the major pieces of feedback from that was that the licensing system, we really should have a look at that, because we had inherited the former European regulations, but we also had the regulations on the Air Navigation Order for national licenses, and there were certainly some efficiencies to be made there, shall we say.
I mean, I think it was fiendishly complicated. On the kind of excuse for it being fiendishly complicated, a lot of that complexity had been brought about by putting little sticking plasters on it to enable many people to continue to fly who perhaps wouldn't have been able to. So it wasn't all bad, it was just all bad when you tried to understand it.
So the starting point of the project was very much to kind of come back to first principles and say, for the ICAO licenses, so for the PPL and higher, what does the ICAO Annex 1 text actually say? What are the minimum requirements, and then kind of build from there. And then on the sub-ICAO piece, we had obviously inherited the LAPL, the Light Aircraft Pilot Licence, from the ARSA system, but of course the UK issued LAPL was no longer valid in Europe, so it had effectively been relegated to the same status as the NPPL, the National Private Pilot Licence. So the NPPL had kind of been running in parallel with the LAPL since 2000, and when it came in 2002. So there was clearly a bit of duplication there that we had to sort out.
And that's why I think one of the things that's proposed is that come October, if you haven't got a LAPL by then, you're not going to get one issued, but you get an NPPL issued, which will give you exactly the same privileges as your LAPL. And I think I'm right in saying, I hope I'm right in saying, that the principle is that none of this change in regulation will stop someone being able to do what they can do today. They'll be able to do it tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So after quite an extensive debate on this subject, we decided the best way to go was to have a single sub-ICAO licence for the UK, and we decided that should be the NPPL. So have an integrated licence that goes up to 2,000 kilos max takeoff weight, that includes microlights, includes SEPs up to that weight, and also includes TMGs up to that weight as well. So as part of that, we'll be ceasing the issue of the LAPL from October this year. But existing LAPL holders, they remain valid. It's a lifetime licence, albeit we will be asking them in due course to move over to the fixed validity revalidation system, in line with our proposals to align revalidation requirements kind of across the board for the SEP, TMG, microlight ratings, regardless of what licence they're attached to.
So I think revalidation is probably a good subject to look at now, because that's kind of, for most existing pilots, that's probably their main interaction with the kind of licensing regulation once they got their license. If they kind of go, yeah, I've got my PPL, I'm not going to do a CPL or anything else, your interaction is going to be when you revalidate. So what's that going to be now, in simple terms? As simple as you can make it.
We're not doing anything radical. So many of your viewers will be familiar with the system that came in with JAR FCL in 2000, which is essentially a 2-year validity period for the SEP rating, and then you've got to do 12 hours and an hour's worth of refresher training as part of that in order to revalidate by experience. So that broadly is staying the same. But what had happened was that between the PPL, the LAPL, and the NPPL-A, these very slight misalignments, they all followed the kind of fundamental principle that the privilege is valid for 24 months, but there were all these slight misalignments in terms of like when the hours had to be done and so forth. So we're lining all of that up, moving the existing LAPL holders over to a fixed validity system. And so, for example, what the end result of that will be that for the SEP rating, the TMG rating, and the microlight rating, regardless of what licence the rating is endorsed on, the requirements will be the same. So approximately you're now going to be able to do 6 of the 12 hours in the first year of validity, and the refresher training flight can be done at any point in the period of validity as well.
Okay, so that's a good simplification that hopefully everyone can get their head round. And I think I'm right in saying, and there's another minor change there that's been proposed, that your hours that you do for those 12 hours, if you like, could be on a microlight, a 3-axis microlight.
Yeah, so for the PPL, that's actually already the case. The refresher training, though, still had to be done in a non-microlight aircraft if we're, say, talking about an SCP or a TMG rating, whereas now for the SCP rating, you can do it in a 3-axis microlight as well, the refresher training.
So that's got the hour thing sorted. There's been some changes to, is the hour, the content of the hour, is that now more prescriptive?
Yeah, so one of the things you'll see in the AMC consultation, so the AMC is essentially the acceptable means of compliance and the guidance material that will support the changes that will hopefully come in October.
Is that where you bury the devil?
Yeah.
In that bit of detail?
So AMC is not regulation per se. It's there to give stakeholders an understanding of what an acceptable means of complying with the regulation looks like, and guidance material is there to assist with the interpretation of the regulation. And one of the things you'll see in the consultation for the AMC consultation that's open at the moment is a bit more AMC and GM around the biennial refresher training flight. So we're not turning it into a mini test. The intention is not to provide like a really rigid kind of and one-size-fits-all structure to it, but we do want pilots and instructors to approach it from a sort of best practice point of view in a more structured way than perhaps hitherto has been the case. So having a little briefing, talking about what the pilot wants to get out of the day, rather than just perhaps adding up little bits of training throughout the period of the ratings validity. And we think by focusing on that refresher training, that will benefit the ongoing kind of competence of pilots.
Okay, the other thing that I've seen people get positive about, should we say, is the introduction of, not only in the syllabus but in the testing as well, of the use of tablets, what I would call tablets, but the CA have probably got a different name for that.
Yeah, so the term we use is VFR moving map devices.
So you walk down the corridor, okay, have you remembered your VFR moving map device today?
We are now formally bringing that into, referencing it in the PPL syllabus, and also the PPL skill test schedule as well.
Which is, may I say, not before time. Well done.
Indeed, no, I appreciate for a lot of viewers this will be a long overdue thing, but we think it's the right thing to do.
That kind of brings me on to the whole consultation thing. I need to address this point. There's a few people who've said to me, CA consultation, is there any point in doing that at all? Isn't it just a kind of proofreading exercise? Shouldn't people, do people actually need to, does anyone ever take any notice or do you read the feedback?
So I can honestly say there have been 3 consultations now as part of this process, the thematic, detailed regulations, and now the AMC consultation. I can honestly say, certainly as long as I've been involved, that myself and all my colleagues across the different aircraft categories have read every single word that's been submitted in response. And there have been thousands of responses to these different consultations, and we do read every single response, yes.
But not necessarily act on every single response.
No, because of course, a lot of the responses, the views expressed in them are diametrically opposed to the others. So it's very much an exercise in kind of taking the temperature of the response. So obviously not everyone is going, not every view put forward is going to find its way into the regulations.
If you followed a particular pathway at a certain time and you decided to learn to fly a microlight or something, and you wanted to go later on and do a PPO and add some other ratings, there were several kind of pathways that were kind of dead ends, and you kind of got there, hit your head against the wall, and kind of almost had to go back and start all over again.
Yes, so it's been a major theme of the project to try and smooth those pathways to make the system overall more integrated, such that wherever someone kind of starts in the aviation system, they have a pathway to wherever they want to get to. So, for example, taking the microlight system and bringing it a bit closer to Part FCL. So if you've started with an NPPL, perhaps you got it on microlights, you can now credit more of that flight time towards an ICAO PPL if that's the route you want to go.
And if you've got an ICAO PPL and you want to fly some of the microlight, for example, you don't have to go and add an NPPL to your ICAO PPL. You can do that with differences training.
Yes. Now that was already the case,
Yeah.
but as we mentioned just now, the revalidation has become a little bit easier because you can now do, for example, your biannual refresher training in a microlight as well. One of the changes that we are making though with the NPPL is that we're moving the rating system a bit closer to that for the PPL. So currently on the NPPL, you've got the SSEA, the simple single-engined aircraft rating. You've got the microlight, you've got SLNG, and we're going to move that across to SEP, TMG, and microlight. And the SEP rating on the NPPL will now mirror its big brother on the PPL, insofar as if you've got an SEP rating, you just do differences training and then you can fly microlight. So we're doing away with the kind of mutually exclusive ratings for the NPPL.
Going back to the NPPL SEP, are there limitations to what you can add to that as a national license? So can you add a night rating? Can you add an IRR, as it's now known? Although I think, is that not changing its name back? Did I hear?
Yes. So
or potentially.
It will be possible to add an IMC rating to an NPPL with an SEP rating from October. That's certainly one of the changes. And yes, we've decided that ideally we want to realign the nomenclature around the IMC rating. So until now, it's been known as an instrument rating restricted when endorsed on a Part FCL license. But we think we're better off going back to just the IMC rating. There's no reason to carry that distinction anymore.
That's aeroplanes, but that's not the only category, is it? You've got what? Balloons, sailplanes, helicopters, or
gyroplanes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Do they kind of mimic the aeroplane, or are there differences?
There are differences, inevitably. So with the balloons and sailplanes, we had quite a strategic question at the start of the endeavour as to whether to continue with the assimilated European regulations as we'd inherited them and make them.
You keep saying inherited. I need to remind you, the Civil Aviation Authority was sitting at the top table at EASA and generated quite a lot of these regulations themselves. So it's not like someone went, here's a pile of poo. You were in on the fabrication of it.
Oh yes, no, indeed. The CA was one of the preeminent members of the EASA rulemaking process. But it was, when I say inherited, I just mean, as per the Withdrawal Act,
you weren't deflecting
all of that
to blame.
No, and the EASA system had many strengths, and there was certainly a lot to like about it. There was certainly quite a lot that EASA did, for GA that was good. But obviously, having come out of EASA, and mutual recognition is not going to happen in any reasonable time frame. So we had to look at what was best for the UK.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wasn't criticising that at all. I was just pointing out that it wasn't well, it wasn't me, Gov. They touched it last, and I've got it now, kind of thing. So in terms of balloon, sailplane, and stuff like that, where did you end up?
So we decided to continue with the assimilated law, the retained EU regulations, but we decided to make them more proportionate and more suitable for the UK market. So on the sailplane side of things, we're introducing something called the basic instructor rating, which takes a legacy BGA privilege and essentially imports that into the Part F's SFCL system. So that's a good enhancement. And then on the balloon side of things, we've taken a bit of inspiration from the old A&O balloon licenses. So, for example, we're preserving some of the elements of the system by which you learn to fly a balloon. Initially, get your BPL, and then on the commercial side of things with balloons, we've actually in some areas beefed up the former European regulations a little bit to make them a bit closer to what we had under the A&O prior to EASA.
This is not the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the end of the first part, or something. So there's more to come in the future.
I think it's worth remembering that between the aircrew regulation coming in 2012 and now, EASA have amended it something like 1.5 times a year over that period of time. So I think any notion of kind of getting everything right the first time, is not realistic. And there's certainly more on the to-do list beyond October that we would still like to look at. For example, a lot of stuff around the theoretical knowledge, whether it be for the CPL, for the instrument rating, PPL, TK.
If we get to the 1st of October and everything's good and golden and we're there, is that you redundant? Are you unemployed then?
Well, I hope not. No, I hope not. No, I think there'll be plenty more to do, in the GA space, whether it's licensing or whether whether it's whatever other subject it might be. The GA unit still want to continue the journey that was started a number of years ago, and keep making sure that those regulations remain proportionate and appropriate for UK GA.
Just a quick reminder, the consultation's still open until May the 6th, so go take a look if you get a chance.